The Galactic Union was old. It was so old that its history was mostly dust and digital ghosts. For thousands of years, the different alien races of the Union had lived by a certain set of rules. They believed they knew everything about the universe. They had mapped the stars, harnessed the power of suns, and cataloged every living thing. In the grand libraries of the planet Xylos, there were stories of a race called humans. These stories were treated like fairy tales. In the myths, humans were described as creatures of impossible contradictions. They were said to be soft-skinned, but harder than stone in spirit. They were described as kind healers and terrifying warriors. Most modern aliens laughed at these stories. To them, humans were just monsters used to scare children into finishing their protein meals. High Chancellor Vrex sat in his floating chair, looking out over the capital city of the Union. He was a Thalaxian, a species with 4 eyes and skin like polished emerald. He was currently annoyed. A small mining colony on the edge of the void sector had gone silent. This happened sometimes with space pirates or solar flares, but this time felt different. "Chancellor?" a voice chirped. It was Kale, his young assistant. Kale looked worried. "The scanners in the void sector just picked up a massive energy signature. It's unlike anything in our database." Vrex waved a hand dismissively. "Probably a collapsing star, Kale. Don't be so dramatic. We are the masters of this galaxy. Nothing exists that we do not understand." "But sir," Kale persisted, his voice trembling, "the signature. It isn't natural. It's moving. And it's huge. It's bigger than our largest dreadnought." Vrex paused. He turned his chair toward the holographic display. In the center of the dark void sector, a tiny white light was pulsing. It wasn't a star. It was a rhythmic signal, like a heartbeat. As they watched, the light grew. It wasn't just one ship. It was dozens. Then, hundreds. "Is it the Krell Empire?" Vrex asked, his voice losing its confidence. "Are those warmongers trying to start a border dispute?" "No, sir," Kale said, tapping frantically on his screen. "The ship designs don't match anything. They are blocky, heavy, and covered in thick metal armor. We use energy shields and sleek glass. These things, they look like they were built to be hit and keep moving. They look like flying fortresses." Suddenly, the communication console screamed. A signal was forcing its way through the Union's high-level encryption. This was supposed to be impossible. The Union's firewalls were the best in the galaxy. A face appeared on the giant screen in the command center. It wasn't a face Vrex recognized from any known planet. It was a creature with 2 eyes, a small nose, and skin that looked fragile. It had short, dark hair on its head. It wore a uniform of simple gray fabric with a patch on the shoulder, showing a blue planet with a single moon. The creature spoke. The language was strange, but the Union's universal translator struggled to keep up. It sounded deep and resonant. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet," the figure said. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a fire that made Vrex feel very small. "You have been harvesting resources from the Sol 2 system. You have ignored our automated warnings for 3 of your solar years. You have destroyed our research drones." Vrex found his voice. "I am High Chancellor Vrex. You are trespassing in Union space. We have no record of an Earth. You are a myth, a ghost story." The woman on the screen didn't blink. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. "We are not myths. We were simply waiting to see if you were peaceful. You are not. You are thieves. You have taken what belongs to us, and you have treated the galaxy like your playground while smaller civilizations suffered. You threaten us?" Vrex laughed, though his heart was racing. "We have 10,000 ships. We have weapons that can crack planets." "We don't want to crack your planets," Admiral Chen said softly. "We want our home back, and we want justice for the colonies you crushed to build your luxury towers." She reached out and pressed a button off-screen. "Look at your sensors now, Chancellor." Vrex turned to the window. The sky above the capital planet was usually a beautiful purple, but now, the purple was disappearing. Dark shadows began to blot out the sun. Huge, mountain-sized shapes were dropping out of warp speed right above the atmosphere. They weren't just ships. They were massive slabs of steel and fire. They were so large they created their own gravity, causing the oceans of the planet below to swell in massive tides. The sun was blocked out. In the middle of the day, The capital city was plunged into total darkness. Thousands of smaller ships, like angry hornets, swarmed around the massive carriers. Each one carried the same symbol, a blue marble and a white moon. They thought we were myths, Kale whispered, falling to his knees as he watched the sky turn into a wall of metal. But the myths have come home. Vrex realized then that the old stories were wrong about one thing. The stories said humans were contradictions. But looking at the Armada darkening his stars, Vrex realized they weren't contradictions at all. They were simply the most dangerous things in the universe because they remembered every insult, and they never, ever gave up. The Admiral's face appeared one last time. We are the humans. We are the Terrans. And we are here to collect the debt. The screen went black. The first explosions began to rock the city. The War of the Myths had begun. The darkness over the capital planet, Xylos, was not natural. It was the shadow of millions of tons of human steel. For the citizens of the Galactic Union, the sun had always been a symbol of safety. Now, that sun was hidden behind the hulls of ships that looked like jagged mountains. On the ground, panic was total. High Chancellor Vrex stood frozen on his balcony. He watched as the Union's defense fleet ships that were considered the most advanced in the galaxy scrambled to meet the invaders. The Union ships were beautiful. They were made of white alloys and glowed with blue energy. They looked like pieces of art. The human ships looked like tools of war. They were painted dull black and gray. They didn't glow. They seemed to swallow the light. Fire all planetary cannons. Vrex screamed into his comms. Destroy them. Wipe this myth from our sky. The planetary defense batteries, huge towers that shot beams of pure heat, opened fire. Bright orange beams slammed into the bottom of the largest human carrier. Vrex waited for the ship to explode. He waited for the humans to scream for mercy. But the explosion never came. The heat beams hit the human ship and splashed away like water hitting a rock. The humans didn't rely only on energy shields. They had meters of solid, reinforced armor plating. They had built their ships to survive the heat of stars. From the human carrier, a single hatch opened. A missile the size of a skyscraper drifted out. It didn't use lasers. It was a kinetic slug, a massive piece of heavy metal accelerated to incredible speeds. It hit the main defense tower on the planet's surface. There was no flash of light, only a sound that shook the very foundations of the world. The tower didn't just break. It vanished into a cloud of dust. The shockwave knocked Vrex off his feet. They aren't using plasma, Kale whispered, crawling toward the Chancellor. They are throwing rocks. Very fast, very heavy rocks. Our shields are designed to stop light and heat, not physical objects with that much mass. In the space above the planet, the battle was a slaughter. The Union's sleek ships tried to dance around the human fleet, firing their elegant lasers. The humans didn't try to dance. They simply moved forward in a straight line, firing thousands of metal projectiles and explosive shells. A Union cruiser, the Starseeker, tried to ram a human destroyer. In Union history, ramming was a final, noble sacrifice. But when the Starseeker hit the human ship, the Union ship crumpled like thin foil. The human ship barely felt the impact. It simply turned its heavy turrets and shredded the cruiser with a hail of fire. Inside the human flagship, the UES Valkyrie, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the center of a bridge that was quiet and professional. There were no flashing lights or dramatic music. There were just men and women at screens, speaking in low voices. The Union's secondary line is breaking, Admiral, a tactical officer reported. They are attempting to retreat to the inner moon bases. Don't let them, Chen said. Her voice was cold. Target their engines. We aren't here to destroy their people, but we are here to dismantle their power. Disable the ships, but let the escape pods go. Why let them live, Admiral? The officer asked. They wiped out our mining outposts without a word of warning. Chen looked at the massive holographic map of the galaxy. Because we want them to tell the rest of the Union what happened here. Fear is a better weapon than fire. If we kill them all, we are just monsters. If we let them go, we are a nightmare they can never forget. Down on Xylos, the atmosphere was changing. The human ships began to drop pods. These were small, armored capsules that fell through the sky like shooting stars. Thousands of them rained down on the capital city. They crashed into the plazas, the parks, and the rooftops of the government buildings. The doors of the pods hissed open. Out stepped the human soldiers. To the Thalaxians and the other alien races, these soldiers looked like demons. They were encased in thick, motorized power armor. They carried rifles that made a thumping sound that echoed through the streets. One pod landed directly in front of the Chancellor's palace. A squad of 5 humans stepped out. They didn't run. They walked with a heavy, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Vrex's elite guards, tall aliens with 4 arms and energy blades, charged at the humans. The guards were fast and highly trained, but the humans didn't move to dodge. They raised their rifles and fired. The sound was like thunder. The guards were knocked back by the sheer force of the bullets. Their energy blades flickered and died as they hit the thick plates of the human armor. One human reached out with a metal glove and grabbed the lead guard by the throat. With one hand, the human lifted the alien off the ground. "Where is the High Chancellor?" The human's voice came through a metallic speaker. It was a woman's voice, but it sounded like grinding gravel. The guard pointed a shaking finger toward the high balcony. The human tossed the guard aside as if he weighed nothing. "Command, this is Squad Leader Miller," the soldier said into her helmet. "We have eyes on the target. The palace is ours. The gods of this galaxy are hiding in their rooms." Vrex watched from above, his 4 eyes wide with terror. He had spent his whole life believing that his race was the peak of evolution. He thought the Union was invincible. He looked at the human soldiers below and saw something he had never seen in any alien race: a total lack of doubt. They weren't fighting for fun. They weren't fighting for glory. They were fighting like a machine that had been turned on to perform a task. Suddenly, the sky above the city turned bright white. A massive Union reinforcement fleet had arrived from the nearby star systems. Thousands of ships appeared in a flash of light. For a moment, Vrex felt a spark of hope. "Yes," he shouted. "The Grand Armada is here. Now the humans will see what true power looks like." But Admiral Chen, watching from the Valkyrie, only smiled a small, grim smile. "They brought more targets," she said. "Tell the 2nd Division to initiate the Wall of Fire maneuver. Let's show them why the myths were better left in the books." The human fleet began to shift. The massive ships moved together, locking their shields and overlapping their weapon ranges. They formed a solid wall of metal between the planet and the new Union fleet. The Union ships fired everything they had. The sky became a web of colorful lasers and energy pulses. The human wall of fire absorbed the hits. Then, the humans fired back. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. The human railguns sent slugs of tungsten through the Union ships, passing through one side and out the other. Ships exploded in silent bursts of orange and white. The debris began to fall like burning snow onto the city of Xylos. Vrex watched his Grand Armada turn into scrap metal in less than an hour. He realized then that the Union hadn't just made a mistake. They had woken up a predator that had been evolving in the dark for a long, long time. Kale sat on the floor crying. "The stories were wrong, Chancellor," he sobbed. "The stories said humans were half god and half beast." Vrex looked at the human soldiers now breaking down the heavy palace doors. "No, Kale," Vrex said, his voice a whisper. "The stories were right. We just forgot that gods can be angry." The doors to the throne room blew inward. Smoke filled the air. Through the haze, the heavy, metallic footsteps grew louder. The humans had arrived, and they weren't leaving until the galaxy was changed forever. The throne room of the Galactic Union was a place of silence and great beauty. It had floors made of glowing sea glass and pillars that reached up into the clouds. But now, the silence was broken by the heavy, rhythmic thud of metal boots. The smoke from the door's explosion swirled around the feet of the human soldiers as they entered. High Chancellor Vrex stood behind his long, curved desk. His 4 hands were trembling. He tried to look brave, but his emerald-colored skin had turned a pale, sickly yellow. Beside him, Kale was curled into a ball, hiding his face. The human soldiers stopped 10 paces from the Chancellor. They didn't point their weapons at him. They didn't need to. Their presence alone felt like a weight pressing down on the room. The leader of the squad, the woman named Miller, stepped forward. She reached up and unlatched her helmet. There was a hiss of air as the pressure equalized. She pulled the helmet off, revealing a face that was scarred and tired, but very sharp. She had short hair and blue eyes that looked like ice. To Vrex, she looked small compared to the giant armor she wore, but her spirit felt larger than the room. "You are the one in charge," Miller said. It wasn't a question. "I am the High Chancellor of the Union," Vrex said, his voice cracking. "You are committing an act of war. This is a peaceful civilization." Miller laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Peaceful? We found the ruins of the Zith outposts. We found the mining camps on Ceres 4. You didn't give them a choice. You told them to leave their homes or be erased. When they stayed, you turned your lasers on families. We saw the recordings." Vrex opened his mouth to argue, to say that those were necessary reallocations of resources, but the words died in his throat. The human was looking at him not as a leader, but as a bug she was deciding whether or not to step on. "We aren't here to play politics," Miller continued. "Admiral Chen is coming down. She wants to see the face of the man who thought humanity was a fairy tale." Outside the palace, the city of Xylos was changing. The human armada didn't just stay in the sky. Massive transport ships, shaped like giant boxes, began to land in the public squares. Instead of soldiers coming out, these ships opened their sides to reveal engineers and machines. The humans began to dismantle the Union's communications towers. They didn't destroy them. They took them apart and replaced them with their own technology. They were taking control of the net, the galaxy-wide information system. Every screen on every planet in the Union began to flicker. Suddenly, the image of the human fleet appeared on billions of screens across 1,000 worlds. The aliens of the Union, the bird-like avions, the rock-skinned Goras, the liquid-bodied Hydros all stopped what they were doing. They watched in horror as the invincible capital of Xylos was occupied by creatures from their oldest nightmares. Back in the throne room, a small, sleek craft landed on the palace balcony. The door slid open, and Admiral Sarah Chen stepped out. She wasn't wearing power armor. She wore a clean, dark blue uniform with gold pins on her chest. She looked like a teacher or a judge, not a warrior. She walked past the armored soldiers and stood directly in front of Vrex. She was much shorter than the Thalaxian Chancellor, but she didn't look up at him. She looked through him. "The Union is finished, Vrex," Chen said quietly. "You can't mean that," Vrex pleaded. "We have thousands of systems. Our economy runs the galaxy. If you destroy us, the galaxy will fall into chaos." "We aren't destroying the galaxy," Chen corrected him. "We are firing the management. Your Union was a club for the rich and the powerful. You let the outer rim planets starve while you built towers made of glass and light. We've spent the last 50 years watching you from the shadows. We've been building, learning, and waiting." "Why now?" Vrex asked. "If you were there all along, why show yourselves now?" Chen leaned in closer. "Because you touched our children. One of your scout ships fired on a human colony transport 6 months ago. You thought it was just a primitive ship. You killed 300 people who were just looking for a new home. In that moment, humanity stopped being a myth. We became a shadow that follows you." Vrex felt a cold chill. He remembered a report about a minor skirmish with an unidentified vessel. He had signed the paper without even reading it. To him, it had been a footnote. To the humans, it was a declaration of total war. "What do you want?" Vale whispered from the floor. Chen looked down at the young assistant. Her expression softened for a tiny second. "We want a new union, one where the myths sit at the head of the table. We are going to reorganize your military. We are going to redistribute your hoarded energy cells. And we are going to make sure that no ship ever fires on a civilian vessel again. The other races won't follow you." Vrex hissed, his fear turning into anger. "They will rise up. They will fight you." "Will they?" Chen asked. She signaled to her officer. A screen lit up in the room. It showed live feeds from other Union planets. On the planet of the Goras, the local people weren't fighting the human landing parties. They were standing back, watching in awe as the humans handed out food and medicine that the Union had been withholding for years. On the Avion homeworld, the humans were unlocking the prisons where political rebels had been kept for decades. "You ruled through fear and secrets," Chen said. "We are ruling through strength and truth. Most of your subjects are glad to see you fall." Vrex slumped into his chair. He realized the humans hadn't just brought guns and ships. They had brought a different way of living. They were organized. They were efficient. And they were incredibly focused. "Take him to a holding cell," Chen ordered the soldiers. "Treat him well, but make sure he can see the screens." I want him to watch his empire turn into a memory. As the soldiers grabbed Vrex's arms, he looked at Miller, the soldier who had first entered. "What are you?" he asked. "How can a race be so cruel and so kind at the same time?" Miller put her helmet back on. Her voice became metallic and cold again. "We are humans," she said. "We are the best friends you could ever have, and the worst enemies you could ever imagine. You just picked the wrong side." The soldiers led Vrex away. As he walked through his own palace, he saw human engineers already painting over the Union symbols. They were replacing the gold stars with the simple blue marble of Earth. The Armada hadn't just darkened the stars. It had brought a new sun. The age of the Union was over. The age of man had begun, and it was moving faster than any of them could have dreamed. Admiral Chen stood on the balcony, looking out over the burning horizon. She knew the hard part was just beginning. There were still loyalist fleets in the deep space, and there were still ancient secrets hidden in the Union's vaults. But as she watched her ships patrol the sky, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity was never going back into the storybooks. They were here to stay. The transition of power on Xylos was not loud. It was the sound of a billion machines working in perfect harmony. While the Union had relied on thousands of servants and slow bureaucracies, the humans operated with a terrifying speed. Within 48 hours of the capital's fall, the humans had established a logic grid over the planet. Every transport, every power plant, and every water filtration system was now being monitored by human artificial intelligence. In the lower levels of the palace, which had been converted into a high-tech command center, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a map of the galaxy. The map was mostly red, the color of the Galactic Union, but blue dots were spreading like a virus across the stars. These were the human strike cells. "Report," Chen ordered. General Marcus Thorne, a man whose face looked like it was carved from granite, stepped forward. "The Union's mid-rim fleet is refusing to surrender, Admiral. They've gathered near the Oros Nebula. They have about 5,000 ships, mostly heavy carriers. They think the nebula's gas will mess with our targeting sensors." Chen looked at the nebula on the map. It was a beautiful cloud of glowing purple and pink gas. "They are still thinking like old sailors," she remarked. "They think if they hide in the fog, we can't find them." "Have the Pathfinder units arrived?" "Yes, Admiral. They are in position," Thorne replied. "Then give them the order. We don't have time for a long siege. We need to show the rest of the systems that there is nowhere to hide." While the generals planned the war, the common people of Xylos were experiencing a strange new reality. For the first time in centuries, the lower tiers of the city where the poor lived in the shadows of the luxury towers had power and light. Human engineers had bypassed the Union's paywalls for basic utilities. A young human soldier named Private Leo Rossi was stationed at a food distribution center in one of these lower districts. He was surrounded by a crowd of small, furry aliens called skulks. They were timid creatures who had spent generations as janitors for the Thalaxians. Leo held out a crate of nutrient bars. "Here, take them. It's better than that gray sludge you've been eating," he said, his voice softened by the suit's translator. One of the skulks, an elder with graying fur, looked at Leo with wide eyes. "Why do you do this?" "In the stories, humans eat the hearts of their enemies." Leo chuckled, the sound echoing in his helmet. "The stories were mostly wrong. We don't want your hearts. We just want a galaxy where people can eat without bowing to a chancellor. Just stay calm, stay out of the way, and things will get better." The skulk took the crate, his hands trembling. "You are powerful," the alien whispered. "But the Union has a secret. In the Oros Nebula, they have the World Eater. If you go there, you will die." Leo froze. He tapped his comms. "Command, this is Rossi at Sector 4. I've got local intel about a World Eater weapon at the Oros Nebula. Does that mean anything to us?" The response from the UES Valkyrie was immediate. "Copy that, Private. Scanning archives." Up in the Oros Nebula, the Union's last stand fleet was waiting. Admiral Krell, a fierce warrior with scales like iron, stood on the bridge of his flagship. Behind him, hidden deep within the thick gas of the nebula, was a massive structure. It wasn't a ship. It was a giant ring, miles wide, pulsing with a sickly green light. It was a gravity well generator. If activated, it could collapse a star, turning it into a black hole. It was a forbidden weapon, built in secret by the Union's ancestors. The humans think they have won because they have better metal, Krell hissed. But they do not know the ancient powers. When their armada enters the nebula, we will trigger the ring. We will lose this sector, but the human fleet will be crushed into a single point of nothingness. Sir, a technician shouted. Human signatures detected. They are jumping in. Krell grinned. Let them come. Activate the World Eater. The massive ring began to spin. The space around it started to warp and moan. The purple gas of the nebula was sucked into the center of the ring like water down a drain. It was a terrifying sight, a man-made hunger that could swallow worlds. But the human fleet didn't jump in close. Only one ship appeared. It was small, no larger than a scout vessel. It sat at the very edge of the nebula, watching. One ship? Krell frowned. What are they doing? On the human scout ship, a pilot calmly entered a series of codes. Target locked. Sending the signal. Back on the UES Valkyrie, Admiral Chen watched the data. They've activated a gravity weapon. How primitive. They're trying to use a hammer when they need a needle. General Thorne, deploy the singularity stabilizers. From the human armada, which was still light years away, a massive beam of blue energy was fired. It wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a beam of pure information and counter-gravity. It traveled through subspace, moving faster than light. The beam hit the spinning World Eater ring. In an instant, the green light turned blue. The ring, which had been spinning faster and faster, suddenly slowed down. The gravity well didn't collapse the star. Instead, the energy was pushed back into the ring itself. What is happening? Krell screamed as his ship began to vibrate. Why won't it fire? The humans. They've hacked the physics. The technician wailed. They aren't fighting the weapon. They're changing the rules of the energy. The ring began to glow with an intense heat. With a silent flash that blinded every sensor in the nebula, the World Eater didn't explode. It simply folded in on itself and vanished into a different dimension, taking the Union's secret weapon with it. The nebula was suddenly quiet. The Union fleet sat in the dark, their greatest weapon gone without a single shot being fired. Then, the stars seemed to blink. 500 human dreadnoughts dropped out of warp, surrounding Krell's fleet. They didn't fire. They simply sat there, their massive guns pointed at the Union ships. Admiral Chen's voice came over the Union's emergency frequency. Admiral Krell, your World Eater has been moved to a safe location for study. You have exactly 1 minute to shut down your engines and prepare for boarding. If you resist, we will not use gravity. We will use the metal of our ships to erase yours. Krell looked at the sensors. His fleet was paralyzed. His men were terrified. He looked out the window at the black hulls of the human ships. They looked like the very shadows of death. Lower the shields, Krell said, his voice broken. The myths are not just warriors. They are masters of the universe itself. The Battle of Oros Nebula was over in minutes. It was the last major resistance of the Union military. When the news reached the other systems that the humans had simply turned off, the Union's ultimate weapon, the remaining sectors surrendered one by one. On Xylos, Vrex watched the footage of the nebula from his cell. He saw the human ships, cold and efficient, moving through the purple gas. He realized then that the Union had never stood a chance. They had been playing with fire, while the humans had learned how to control the sun. Part 4 ended not with a bang, but with a quiet realization. The humans weren't just here to take over. They were here to rewrite the destiny of the galaxy. And as the human flags were raised on 1,000 worlds, the people of the galaxy began to wonder, what would a world ruled by humans actually look like? They were about to find out. The transition from the old Galactic Union to the new human-led order was faster than anyone had predicted. While the former leaders expected years of bloody civil war and chaos, the humans brought something far more effective: organization. On the capital planet of Xylos, the atmosphere had shifted from one of terror to a strange, quiet curiosity. The humans did not come as looters or kings. They came as managers of a broken system. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the center of the Great Hall, which had once been the seat of Union power. Now, it was filled with holographic maps of logistics routes, food supply chains, and energy grids. She was looking at a specific sector of the galaxy that had been neglected for centuries, the Outer Rim. Under the Union, these planets were treated as trash heaps. Under the humans, they were the first priority. The Union's wealth was built on a simple lie, Chen said to her staff. They told the people that resources were scarce so they could keep the prices high. But the math doesn't lie. With our technology, R equals S times E divided by P, where the total resource availability is the product of supply and energy. Efficiency divided by the population's basic needs. If we optimize the energy efficiency E, there is enough for everyone to live like a high. Chancellor, General Thorne entered the hall, his boots clicking on the polished floor. Admiral, the last of the local governors has signed the treaty. They didn't even argue. Once they saw the medical ships landing in their slums, they threw their Union badges in the dirt. But we have a new problem. It's not about the war, it's about the peace. The problem Thorne referred to was the Great Integration. The human fleet had brought with them millions of civilians, teachers, doctors, engineers, and farmers. These weren't soldiers in power armor. They were regular people with families. They were moving into the cities, opening shops, and teaching the alien races how to use human technology. For the first time in history, the myths were walking the streets, buying fruit from skulk vendors and sitting in parks with Thalaxian students. On the streets of the lower tiers, the change was visible. Private Leo Rossi, now part of a peacekeeping unit, was helping a group of young aliens fix a broken water pump. He wasn't using a weapon, he was using a multi-tool. The aliens watched him with wide eyes. To them, he was still a giant from the stars, but a giant who knew how to make the water flow again. You're not like the stories, a young Thalaxian girl said, her 4 eyes blinking in sync. The story said you came to eat the light of the stars. Leo laughed and handed her a small metal device. We don't eat light, kid. We just figured out how to share it. Here, this is a solar cell. Put it on your roof, and you'll never have to pay the Union tax for power again. However, while the common people were finding peace, the old elites were plotting. In a dark corner of the galaxy, a group of former Union admirals and chancellors gathered in a secret station. They could not accept a world where they were not the masters. They saw the human kindness as a weakness. They thought that because the humans were helping the poor, they had grown soft. They think they can buy this galaxy with bread and medicine, hissed a Sao, former High Counselor. They have forgotten that power is taken, not given. We still have the Black Sun Fleet. 500 ships hidden in the dark matter pockets of the Void Sector. If we strike now, while they are busy building schools, we can cut the head off their leadership. They didn't realize that the humans were never more dangerous than when they were protecting something they had built. The human Armada hadn't left the stars. It had simply moved into a defensive shield wall formation around the colonized worlds. The human sensors, far more advanced than anything the Union ever possessed, were already tracking the heat signatures of the hidden Black Sun Fleet. Admiral Chen received the notification on her wrist link. A small red dot was blinking in the Void Sector. She didn't look worried. She looked tired. They just don't learn, do they, Marcus? She asked Thorne. Some people only understand the hammer, Admiral. Thorne replied. Shall I send the First Legion? No, Chen said, standing up. Send a message first. Tell them we know exactly where they are. Tell them that if they fire a single shot, we won't just defeat them. We will erase their names from the history books. We will show them that the myths aren't just about heroes. They are also about the monsters that come for those who break the peace. The message was sent across all frequencies. It wasn't a secret. The whole galaxy heard it. It was a promise of total protection for the innocent and total destruction for the tyrants. This was the true power of the humans. They didn't just have the best ships, they had the strongest will. They had decided that the galaxy was going to be a better place, and they were willing to kill anyone who tried to stop them. As Part 5 came to a close, the first Human Galactic Assembly was called to order. Representatives from 1,000 different species sat in a circle, not in a hierarchy. In the center stood Sarah Chen. She didn't wear a crown. She wore her simple blue uniform. The sun rose over Xylos, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the light didn't just hit the high towers. It reached all the way to the ground, where the people were finally, truly free. The Armada was still there, a dark shadow against the stars, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a shield. The message sent by Admiral Chen didn't just reach the hidden rebels. It echoed across every colony, space station, and trade hub in the galaxy. The myth of humanity was no longer a story of ghosts or monsters. It was now a living reality of uncompromising justice. While the first human galactic assembly began its work on Xylos, the rest of the galaxy watched to see if the humans would keep their word. In the Void Sector, the Black Sun Fleet, the last remnants of the Union's military elite, faced a choice. Their leader, High Admiral Krill, stood on the bridge of his cloaked dreadnought, staring at the long-range scans. He had 500 ships, all equipped with dark matter weapons that could bypass traditional shields. He had spent his life believing that strength was the only truth. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "the human message is being broadcast on a loop. They have identified our exact coordinates in the dark matter pocket. Their targeting locks are active." Krell gripped the edge of his console. He had expected the humans to be distracted by their schools and their food lines. He had expected them to be soft, but the humans weren't distracted. They were multitasking. They were building a future with one hand and holding a sword in the other. "They are bluffing," Krell hissed. "They cannot protect 1,000 worlds and fight us at the same time. Prepare the dark matter cannons. We strike the Xylos assembly directly. If we kill their admiral, their new dawn will turn into a long night." But Krell had fundamentally misunderstood human history. Humans didn't rely on a single head to lead them. Quote, "They were a species built on the idea of the collective will." As the Black Sun Fleet began to power up their engines, the space around them didn't just ripple, it shattered. Instead of a fleet of ships, the humans sent phase pods. These were tiny, unmanned drones that moved between dimensions. They didn't fire lasers. They simply attached themselves to the engines of the Black Sun ships. In an instant, the dark matter engines, the pride of the Union's secret research, were neutralized. "Our power is gone," the technician wailed. "They didn't even fire a shot. They just turned us off." The human armada didn't appear as a wall of fire this time. They appeared as a circle of silence. 3 human dreadnoughts dropped out of warp, their massive hulls dwarfing Krell's flagship. A single communication channel opened. It wasn't Admiral Chen this time. It was General Thorne. "Admiral Krell," Thorne's voice was like grinding stone. "You were given a choice. You chose the hammer. Now, you get the anvil." Thorne didn't order a boarding party. He didn't order an execution. He ordered the deconstruction. Human repair drones, usually used for building stations, swarmed the Black Sun Fleet. They began to literally take the ships apart while the crews were still inside. It was a terrifying display of technical superiority. The humans weren't treating this as a battle. They were treating it as a salvage operation. "We are not warriors to them," Krell realized as he watched his ship's outer plating being peeled away by robotic arms. "We are just old machines that need to be recycled." Back on Xylos, the assembly was making history. Representatives from the Skulks, the Avions, and even the rock-skinned Goras were speaking for the first time. They weren't asking for permission. They were discussing the Galactic Bill of Rights that the humans had drafted. Admiral Chen sat in the back of the room, watching the aliens debate. She looked at the young Thalaxian assistant, Kale, who had once served High Chancellor Vrex. Kale was now working as a translator for the smaller species. "Do you think they will ever stop being afraid of us?" Chen asked him quietly. Kale looked at the humans stationed around the room. They weren't in power armor today, but they still looked formidable. "The fear will stay for a long time, Admiral," Kale admitted. "But for the first time, the fear is mixed with something else. Hope. Under the Union, we knew exactly what would happen to us if we failed. Under you, we don't know what will happen. That uncertainty is the first true freedom we've ever had." The news of the Black Sun Fleet's recycling reached the assembly by midday. It served as a final punctuation mark on the old era. The myths were not just here to stay. They were here to ensure that no one ever lived in the shadows again. As the sun began to set on the first day of the new government, a human transport ship landed in the palace gardens. It didn't carry soldiers. It carried seeds. Thousands of different types of plants from Earth, carefully shielded to grow in the soil of Xylos. It was a symbolic gesture, but a powerful one. "We aren't just changing your laws," Chen said as she stood before the assembly to close the session. "We are changing the very ground you walk on. We are going to turn this galaxy into a garden, and as long as you respect the peace, you are welcome to walk in it with us." Part 6 ended with the first human trees being planted in the emerald soil of the capital. The Armada still darkened the stars above, but to the people below, those ships no longer looked like predators. They looked like the walls of a home they were finally allowed to live in. The age of myths had ended, and the age of the citizen had begun. The planting of the Earth seeds on Xylos was a symbol that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. But while the capital celebrated, the Great Integration faced its most difficult challenge, the deep space infrastructure. For thousands of years, the Union had built its economy on a complex web of toll gates, massive space stations that charged smaller species for the right to travel between stars. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Valkyrie, looking at a holographic map of the trade routes. "The toll gates are the last chains of the old regime," she told General Thorne. "As long as someone has to pay to move from one sun to another, they aren't truly free." "The gatekeepers are resisting, Admiral," Thorne reported. "These are independent guilds that grew fat under the Union's corruption. They've locked the gates and are threatening to blow them up, which would collapse the local wormholes for decades." Chen didn't hesitate. "They think they hold the keys to the galaxy. They've forgotten that humans didn't use gates to find this place. We used engines." In a move that surprised the entire Galactic Assembly, humanity did not attack the gates. Instead, they revealed a technology they had kept secret during the initial invasion, the slipstream drive. While the Union relied on fixed points in space to travel, human ships could now create their own paths anywhere. Within a week, the human fleet began distributing slipstream modules to the merchant ships of the Skulks, the Avions, and the Goras. The toll gates became useless overnight. The guilds, once the most powerful economic force in the galaxy, watched from their silent stations as thousands of ships simply bypassed them, flying through the void as if the gates didn't exist. On Xylos, the mood was shifting from cautious hope to genuine wonder. Private Leo Rossi found himself in a local market, but he wasn't there to patrol. He was there to eat. He sat at a table with a group of Goras beings who looked like living boulders and shared a meal of earth-grown potatoes and local blue grain. "You gave us the drives for free," one of the Goras grunted, his voice sounding like rocks rubbing together. "Why? The Union would have charged us a century of labor for that technology." Leo shrugged, his human face showing a simple smile. "My people have a saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. If you guys can trade faster and grow stronger, the whole galaxy gets safer. We don't want to be your masters. We want to be your neighbors." However, the old dawn wasn't completely finished. Deep in the archives of the palace, the former assistant Kale discovered something terrifying. He brought the digital file directly to Admiral Chen. "Admiral, the Union wasn't just a government," Kale said, his four eyes wide with panic. "It was a shield. The void sector where you found the Black Sun fleet. It wasn't empty because of the Union. It was empty because of them." He opened a file titled Project Silence. It contained ancient sensor data of a machine intelligence from outside the galaxy, a swarm that consumed all organic life. It, too, encountered. The Union had been paying a tribute of energy and resources to the edge of the galaxy to keep the swarm asleep. By stopping the Union's resource harvesting, the humans had inadvertently stopped the tribute. "The swarm is waking up, isn't it?" Chen asked, her voice remaining calm even as her heart raced. "The sensors at the edge of the galaxy are already turning red," Kale replied. Chen looked out at the darkening stars. The Armada that had once seemed like a force of conquest now had a new, much larger purpose. She tapped her comms. "General Thorne, cancel the shore leave. We have a debt to the galaxy that we didn't know we owed." Tell the fleet to prepare for long-range interception. The myths are about to face a nightmare. The news didn't cause a panic on Xylos, because the humans didn't let it. Instead of hiding the truth, Chen addressed the assembly. The Union paid for peace with fear and blood, she declared. Humanity will pay for it with steel and courage. We aren't going to send tributes to the dark. We are going to send the Armada. As Part 7 drew to a close, the massive black ships began to lift off from the planets they had just liberated. They weren't leaving. They were moving to the front lines. The people of the galaxy watched them go, realizing that the darkness of the human ships was the only thing standing between them and total extinction. The true test of the human spirit was no longer about ruling, it was about surviving. The departure of the human armada from the core worlds was a sight that no one in the galaxy would ever forget. Thousands of ships, ranging from small scouts to the mountain-sized dreadnoughts, ignited their engines and accelerated toward the edge of the galaxy. They were heading for the Void Sector, the place where the ancient swarm was beginning to stir. Admiral Sarah Chen sat in her command chair on the U.S. Valkyrie. The ship was vibrating as it pushed through the fabric of space using the slipstream drive. "Status report on the swarm," she commanded. General Thorne tapped his holographic screen. "It's worse than the Union's Project Silence files suggested. The swarm isn't just machines. It's a biological-mechanical hybrid that replicates by consuming entire asteroid belts. They've sensed that the energy tributes have stopped, and they are moving toward the nearest colony, Oros 9, to feed." Oros 9 was a mining world populated by the rock-skinned Goras. Under the Union, they had been slaves, but under the humans, they were now citizens. Chen knew that if the swarm reached Oros 9, it would be a massacre. "Prepare the Sunbreaker array," Chen ordered. "We can't just shoot them with railguns. There are too many of them. We need to create a barrier they cannot cross." The Sunbreaker array was a experimental human technology that could focus the energy of a nearby star into a solid wall of plasma. It was dangerous and had never been tested in combat, but the humans were a race that thrived on calculated risks. As the human fleet arrived at the edge of the Oros system, they saw the swarm. It looked like a silver cloud that stretched across millions of miles of space. It hummed with a sound that could be felt through the hulls of the ships, a hungry, buzzing noise that sounded like the end of the world. "All ships, form the Aegis pattern," Thorne shouted over the fleet-wide comms. The human ships moved with a precision that the old Union admirals would have found impossible. They locked their shields together, creating a massive glowing dome over the planet Oros 9. The first wave of the swarm hit the shields like a physical storm. Millions of tiny metallic creatures slammed into the energy barriers, exploding into sparks. But the swarm was endless. For every million destroyed, 10 million more took their place. The human shields began to flicker. "Admiral, the heat levels are critical," an officer yelled. "The Aegis won't hold." "Hold the line," Chen commanded, her voice steady. "We are humans. We don't break. We endure." Down on the surface of Oros 9, the Goras watched the sky. Usually when a threat came, the Union would have abandoned them. But the humans stayed. They saw the black ships of the Armada burning red as they absorbed the friction of the swarm's attack. Suddenly the human carriers opened their main bays. Instead of fighters, they launched gravity anchors. These devices pulled the swarm into tight clusters, dragging the silver creatures into the path of the Sunbreaker array. "Fire," Chen said quietly. A beam of pure white light shot from the human array, drawing energy directly from the Oros sun. It hit the center of the swarm, vaporizing billions of units in a fraction of a second. The silver cloud shrieked as it was burned away, the light turning the dark void sector into a temporary second sun. The swarm, which had been an unstoppable force for eons, hesitated. It had never encountered a species that fought with such coordinated ferocity. It began to pull back, retreating into the deep dark beyond the galaxy's edge. The humans didn't chase them. They stood their ground, their ships scarred and glowing from the heat. They had saved Oros 9, but they knew this was only the first skirmish. "They'll be back," Thorne said, looking at the scanners. "Let them come," Chen replied. "We've spent our whole history fighting each other. Now, we have something worth fighting for together." As Part 8 concluded, the news of the victory at Oros 9 reached Xylos. The people of the galaxy realized that the humans hadn't just replaced the Union, they had replaced the very idea of fear. The Armada still darkened the stars, but for the first time, the darkness felt like a warm blanket protecting the galaxy from the cold. The myths had become the guardians. The victory at Oros 9 was not the end of the war, but it was the birth of a new galaxy. The ancient swarm had been pushed back into the dark, and for the first time in history, the different races of the stars were not united by the chains of the Union, but by a shared sense of survival. The myths had proven they were more than just warriors. They were the shield that the galaxy had never known it needed. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Valkyrie as it returned to Xylos. Her ship was battered, its black hull covered in the scars of plasma fire and swarm impacts, but it flew with a pride that was infectious. Beside her stood Kale, the former Union assistant who had become a vital link between the humans and the alien assembly. "The swarm will return one day," Kale said, looking at the stars that were no longer shadowed by the threat of extinction. "But I don't think the galaxy will be afraid anymore." Chen nodded. "Kale, fear is what happens when you face the dark alone. We aren't alone anymore." Back on the capital planet, a massive celebration was underway, but it wasn't a military parade. It was a festival of cultures. The Skulks, the Avions, the Goras, and the humans were sharing food, music, and stories. The Armada still sat in high orbit, its massive presence a constant reminder of the strength humanity provided. But the citizens below no longer looked up with trembling hearts. They looked up and saw the guardians of their peace. High Chancellor Vrex, still in his comfortable but secure holding cell, watched the festivities on a monitor. He saw Private Leo Rossi laughing as he danced a clumsy traditional dance with a group of skulks. He saw the technology he had hoarded being used to heal sick children in the lower tiers. He realized then that his union had failed because it was built on taking, while the humans were building something that would last because it was built on giving. "They are a strange race," Brex whispered to himself. "They have the power to destroy everything, yet they choose to fix a broken water pump." In the Great Hall of the Assembly, Admiral Chen walked to the podium to deliver her final address of the campaign. She didn't talk about the ships she had destroyed or the battles she had won. She spoke about the trees that were now growing in the emerald soil of Xylos. Humanity came to these stars as a myth. Chen began, her voice broadcasting to every corner of the known universe. "We were the monsters in your stories and the ghosts in your history, but today we are something else. We are your neighbors, your partners, and your friends. The Armada will stay in the sky, not to rule you, but to ensure that the sun always rises on your worlds." She looked at the diverse crowd, hundreds of species, once divided by greed and fear, now sitting together. "The age of myths is over. The age of the galaxy has begun." As she finished, the entire assembly rose to their feet. There was no cheering at first, only a deep, resonant silence of respect that moved through the hall like a wave. Then, a single Gora stood up and struck his chest in a salute, followed by an Avion and then a Skulk. The story of the humans who came from the dark to bring the light was no longer a myth. It was the first chapter of a new history. The Armada had indeed darkened the stars, but only so that the people of the galaxy could finally see how bright they could shine together. As the Valkyrie settled into its permanent docking bay, the new dawn was no longer a promise. It was a reality. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as kings, but as the brothers and sisters of every living thing that looked up and dreamed. The myth was real, and it was beautiful.